Charlotte was born and raised in a small town where time seemed to move at a slower pace, and traditions were passed down from generation to generation. The streets were lined with old trees that, with each season, would color the ground with golden leaves or delicate petals. The houses displayed flowered porches, where neighbors gathered for long conversations at dusk. Despite all the serenity of the place, Charlotte always carried within her an uneasy desire for something beyond the limits of that town. Her curious gaze sought more than the familiarity of the same streets and faces. She wanted to discover the world, learn, and grow. Since childhood, this questioning spirit took her away from the carefree play of the other children. While they ran through the fields, Charlotte preferred to accompany her mother, a dedicated nurse, observing every careful gesture while treating the neighbors. The sparkle in her mother's eyes when easing others' pain awakened something deep inside her. It was there, in the silence of small, everyday scenes, that her dream of becoming a doctor was born. Matthew, on the other hand, had always been an essential part of that town. Since his early years, he seemed to belong to that place like the roots of the trees surrounding him. He grew up amid carefree laughter and sunny days, sharing every stage of childhood with Charlotte. But while she looked outward, he looked inward, finding in the familiarity of what he knew an unshakable comfort. Matthew didn't want to escape. He wanted to make that space even better. From a young age, he followed his father in the family business, learning every detail about how the hardware store that supplied the town operated. His spirit was resilient, his hands always ready to help. He didn't see the future as an escape, but as an opportunity to build something solid without giving up his roots. He dreamed of modernizing the family business, expanding it, making it even more prosperous. Unlike Charlotte, his happiness wasn't in exploring the world, but in strengthening what he had always called home. The town where they both grew up was a haven of tranquility, the type of place where every corner held a story, and every face was familiar. Mornings were filled with the sound of birds, mixed with the clatter of bicycles passing over cobblestone streets. The local business district was lively, but unhurried, with small shops that resisted the passage of time and the rise of large chains. On Sundays, the main square filled with families who gathered under the shade of ancient trees, while children ran between flower beds. Life there had its own rhythm, a cycle that repeated itself with certainty. For many, that place was synonymous with stability and belonging. For others, like Charlotte, it was just the starting point for something greater. The long-awaited moment finally arrived. The white envelope with the university seal rested on the table, holding within it the future Charlotte had dreamed of. Her fingers slid over the paper before tearing it open, her heart racing. The result was there, a full scholarship to study medicine at one of the country's most prestigious universities. It was the confirmation that all the effort, all the sleepless nights, and every sacrifice had been worth it. The news spread quickly throughout the town. Charlotte's parents were beaming with pride, and neighbors congratulated her at every encounter on the street. That achievement was not only a pride for her family, but for everyone who had witnessed her dedication since childhood. But for Matthew, the news came with a different feeling. His pride for the woman he loved was mixed with a silent restlessness. He had always known that day would come, but knowing it didn't make it any easier to deal with the reality of seeing her leave. Time seemed to pass faster after the news. The days turned into farewells disguised as usual meetings, into glances that said more than words. Charlotte was excited, but a weight began to settle in her chest. She knew that her departure would change everything. The future she had longed for now required leaving behind the town she knew, the comfortable routines, and above all, Matthew. The last night before the trip, under the starry sky they had shared so many times, Charlotte made the only request that could ease the pain of their separation, that he wait for her. There was urgency and hope in her voice. Matthew didn't hesitate. His promise came without doubts, without apparent fears. He loved her, and at that moment, he believed nothing could change that. The distance between Charlotte and Matthew was not only measured in kilometers, but in everything that now separated them. Time, routine, challenges, and most of all, the absence. In the beginning, Charlotte still tried to keep the promise alive, holding on to what remained of the relationship. But as months turned into years, her life began to take its own course. In college, the exhausting routine consumed her completely. Between exams, practical classes, and shifts at the university hospital. The world she had known before began to fade into the past. Calls to Matthew became less frequent. Messages were read and forgotten. And when they talked, the sense of disconnection was evident. Charlotte felt that he didn't understand what she was going through, and no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't find the words to explain. It was in this emptiness that Ryan appeared, a classmate, always present, always willing to listen. Unlike Matthew, he didn't need Charlotte to explain her exhaustion. He lived it the same way. He was there during the tough times, during the endless shifts, on the days Charlotte felt on the edge of collapse. At first, he was just a friend, but the line between friendship and something more became too subtle to ignore. Charlotte didn't want to admit it, but she began to feel more connected to Ryan than to Matthew. There was a lightness in being with someone who belonged to that same universe, who understood her frustrations without her having to put them into words. Casual study sessions turned into dinners after a tough shift. Conversations started to last longer than any call she made to Matthew. And without realizing it, she began to wonder if the love she felt for the past still made sense in the present. While Charlotte let herself drift into this new reality, Matthew faced a dark period. His dream of having his own business seemed further and further away. The store, which had started with so much effort, was now struggling to stay afloat. The small town didn't offer many opportunities, and the little he had managed to achieve seemed to be crumbling. Suppliers were late with orders, bills were piling up, and Matthew spent sleepless nights trying to find a solution. He couldn't fail, not after everything he had done to build something worthwhile. But no matter how much effort he put in, the business seemed to be slipping through his fingers. The weight of responsibility grew, but nothing hurt as much as Charlotte's absence. He tried to understand, tried to accept that she had a busy life, that she was focused on what she had always dreamed of. But deep down, a cruel doubt consumed him. Did she still think about him? Charlotte's silence began to answer that question. The calls went unanswered. Messages were ignored for days. When they finally managed to talk, Charlotte sounded distant, as if she were trapped in another world, a world where he no longer belonged. The last call between Charlotte and Matthew happened on a cold night. The sky was clear, but inside each of them, a storm had been forming for a long time. The distance that once seemed like a temporary obstacle now appeared irreversible, and that conversation, though avoided for weeks, was inevitable. Charlotte no longer felt the same anxiety when seeing Matthew's name on her phone screen. His voice, once a comfort, now sounded distant, almost like an echo of a past she no longer knew if it still had a place in her life. On the other side, Matthew still held tightly to that promise, but he was beginning to feel like he was the only one doing so. The conversation started like so many others. A tired hi, a "how was your day?" said out of obligation. But unlike before, there was something in Matthew's voice that betrayed his exhaustion. He no longer wanted to run away from what was happening. Charlotte's one-word answers, the rush to end the conversation, the coldness disguised as tiredness, all of it was like knives piercing his skin. For years, he had tried to understand, tried to justify to himself that it was just a phase, that things would get better. But there were no more excuses. It was then that Matthew asked the question Charlotte had been dreading. Was there still space for him in her life? The silence on the other end was the cruelest answer. Charlotte wanted to say something that didn't hurt so much, that would make everything easier. But the truth was that she had already moved on, even if she didn't have the courage to admit it. Her life had taken a different direction. The promise, that vow of eternal love, seemed like an innocent memory from a time that no longer existed. She hesitated, trying to find the right words, but ended up saying what Matthew feared most. Maybe it was better for each of them to go their separate ways. What followed was an avalanche of emotions. There were no shouts, no direct accusations, but the pain was in every word spoken, and in the many that remained trapped in their chests. Matthew felt his world crumble as Charlotte tried to convince herself she was doing the right thing. She tried to explain, tried to say it wasn't his fault, that life had just taken a different course than they had imagined. But to Matthew, it only sounded like empty justifications. He didn't need explanations. He needed her. But now it was too late. The call ended with a painful silence. Neither of them said goodbye. They just let the distance, which had long been between them, do what was inevitable. In the days that followed, Matthew buried himself in work. He tried to convince himself that getting over Charlotte was just a matter of time. But time passed, and the emptiness remained. Every corner of the town reminded him of her. Every plan he made for the future included her. And now, without Charlotte, everything seemed meaningless. Charlotte, in turn, tried not to think too much. She immersed herself in her studies even more intensely, believing that if she stayed busy, she wouldn't have time to feel. Ryan was by her side, willing to fill that space. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't completely erase the pain of Matthew's absence. What hurt her the most was the way everything happened. She didn't want it to be this way. She never wanted to hurt him. But at some point along the way, she stopped seeing Matthew as part of her future and started seeing him as part of a past that she needed to leave behind. The final separation was a blow to both of them, but each dealt with the pain in their own way. Charlotte moved forward as if nothing had happened, but in the silence of lonely nights, she felt a weight in her chest that she couldn't name. Matthew tried to rebuild what was left of him, but the town that once seemed like his home now felt too small to contain his pain. What remained were memories, good enough to be remembered, but too painful to be relived. And, in the end, the only certainty was that no matter what they felt, what existed between them had been left behind. Years passed since the separation that transformed Charlotte and Matthew's lives into a mosaic of fragmented memories. Charlotte graduated in medicine and was now a respected doctor, full of dreams and hopes, but still carrying the pain of loss. Matthew, on the other hand, struggled to keep his construction materials business afloat, a family legacy that had now become his battleground. Time, although it had softened the pain, hadn't erased the memories that still connected them. On a sunny spring day, Charlotte returned to her hometown for a medical conference. The familiar scent of the town and the streets she knew so well enveloped her in a sense of nostalgia. As she drove through the tree-lined streets, every corner brought memories of her childhood and, inevitably, of Matthew. Thoughts she had tried to bury rose up like ghosts from the past, challenging the new life she had built. The conference, though professional, made her heart race as she realized that many of the attendees were familiar faces. The venue for the event was close to the construction materials store that had once been the center of attention for Matthew. She hesitated at the thought of visiting it. The urge to see him again, even for just a moment, was irresistible. The desire to relive a little of that connection that had never truly disappeared led her to the store. As she entered, Charlotte felt the warmth of old memories. The shelves were filled with products, and the familiar smell of wood and paint surrounded her, bringing the image of Matthew working, with a confident smile on his face. The store was full of customers, but her gaze quickly found Matthew. He was there, immersed in work that seemed to be his passion, although his expression showed a certain emotional weight. He didn't see her right away. His dark hair, now slightly graying, and the marks of time on his face told stories of challenges and overcoming. Charlotte hesitated for a moment, struggling against the wave of emotions that washed over her. It was as if time had not passed. The feeling of reunion and loss enveloped her. Finally, Matthew looked in her direction. Their eyes met, and the world around them disappeared. A mix of surprise and recognition crossed his face. The memories became tangible between them, a connection that still existed, even if silently. The past held them in a moment that felt eternal. Charlotte realized that, although their lives had taken different paths, the love that once united them had never truly disappeared. And there, in front of Matthew, she began to understand that some promises may not be forgotten, but instead transformed into new opportunities. The reunion with Charlotte brought a flood of emotions for Matthew. Seeing her, radiant and fulfilled, rekindled feelings he thought he had buried with the pain of the separation. At the same time, a shadow of insecurity surrounded him. Matthew found himself confronted with a series of internal dilemmas. Although his love for Charlotte still lingered, the memory of the promise made and the suffering that followed weighed on his conscience. As he watched Charlotte interact with people around her, his mind traveled back in time. He remembered how easy it was to dream beside her, how the plans for the future seemed so simple and promising. But life had pulled them apart. Matthew couldn't help but wonder if she still saw him as a partner, or just as a memory of a distant past. The insecurity gnawed at his heart. He was no longer the young dreamer. Time and hardships had shaped him into a cautious man, more concerned with reality than with ideals. Matthew remembered the difficulties he faced in his business. Every day was a struggle to stay afloat. The weight of responsibilities had made him more reserved, while Charlotte seemed to have flourished in a world full of possibilities. The comparison was undeniable. He wondered if he could keep up with her pace, if there was still room for both of them in a future that now seemed so uncertain. With the reunion, Matthew realized he was at a crossroads. He wanted to open up to Charlotte, to the chance of rewriting their story together. But the fear of getting hurt again kept him at a distance. The idea of exposing his weaknesses and uncertainties to the woman who once was his everything terrified him. The dilemma of moving forward or staying trapped in the past became harder and harder to ignore. As the conference went on, Charlotte's presence consumed him with conflicting thoughts. He knew he had to make a decision, but every time he looked at her, the memory of the pain and love they once shared mixed in his heart, creating a storm of emotions that stopped him from acting. The reunion between Charlotte and Matthew culminated in a moment of intense emotion and vulnerability. After a day full of smiles and meaningful glances, Matthew decided he needed to confront the feelings that had been building up inside him. At the end of the conference, in a small park they used to visit in their childhood, Matthew paused, feeling the cool breeze of the evening that carried the scent of flowers. The atmosphere was charged with tension, and the silence between them seemed to speak louder than any words. Charlotte, with a glint in her eyes that reminded him of the old days, looked at Matthew, realizing that he was struggling with an internal battle. He finally broke the silence, sharing his insecurities and fears about the future, revealing how much the promise made years ago still affected him. Charlotte, for her part, listened attentively, her heart aching for the pain Matthew had carried. Guilt enveloped her, reminding her how she had focused on her own dreams, leaving Matthew behind. She had always known that distance came at a price, and now she fully understood the impact of her choice. Matthew's vulnerability, exposing his weaknesses, touched her heart in a way she didn't expect. Emotions overflowed between them, and Charlotte felt an overwhelming need to connect with him, to make him understand that her love had never disappeared. She moved closer, gently touching his hand, as if this gesture could calm the ghosts of the past that still haunted them. Matthew's eyes, which had once reflected pain and insecurity, began to shine with a new hope. The conversation flowed naturally, as if time had never passed. They both shared their fears, their achievements, and the desires that had shaped them during the years of separation. The space between them became sacred, and in that instant, the weight of the past began to dissipate. There, in the soft light of the evening, they allowed themselves to be vulnerable with each other, rediscovering not only the love that still existed, but also the strength that could be found in honesty and connection. The reconciliation between Charlotte and Matthew unfolded in a moment, full of symbolism and sincerity. After the emotional conversation in the park, Charlotte realized that she needed to do something meaningful to show Matthew that her love had not only withstood the test of time, but had also grown stronger through adversity. The weight of the promises made years ago still hung between them, but the reality of the present demanded concrete actions. In her mind, the idea of a gesture that reflected the depth of her feelings began to take shape. She knew she needed to go beyond words and show Matthew that she was ready to face challenges together, not just as friends, but as partners. So, while Matthew struggled to rebuild his business, Charlotte immersed herself in careful planning, determined to turn her intentions into an act that could touch his heart. A few days later, while Matthew dealt with the challenges in his business, Charlotte dedicated herself to a special project that made her come alive. Inspired by their conversations and her genuine desire to create something that would unite their passions and hopes, she decided to organize a charity event in the city. The goal was to raise funds for a cause that had always been close to her heart, improving access to healthcare for the local community. This project not only connected her to her dream of helping people, but it was also a way to show Matthew that she had changed, that she had matured, and was ready to build a future alongside him. Charlotte worked tirelessly, mobilizing friends and family, contacting local businesses for donations, and involving the community. The event, which would become a milestone, was not just a fundraiser, but a celebration of love and unity, a reflection of what she and Matthew could achieve together. The event, held on a sunny afternoon, was a success beyond expectations. Friends, family, and community members gathered to support the cause, and the energy in the place was contagious. Matthew, upon arriving, couldn't help but feel emotional seeing Charlotte leading the event with passion and determination. He watched her as she spoke with guests, her excitement evident, lighting up the room. Throughout the afternoon, he realized that his heart was filling with hope, something he hadn't felt in a long time. Charlotte was radiant, surrounded by people who admired her, and the pride he felt for her was palpable. The connection they shared seemed stronger than ever. And Matthew began to understand that the true essence of love lies in the ability to support each other in times of need. During the closing ceremony, Charlotte took the stage, ready to share her vision. With a sincere smile, she spoke about the importance of health in people's lives and how everyone can make a difference, emphasizing the vital role of the community in this process. Her words echoed through the space, capturing the attention of everyone present. Through her words, she not only conveyed her mission, but also made it clear how important Matthew was in her journey. The sincerity in her voice touched everyone's heart, and he, in particular, felt that Charlotte had transformed into a strong and determined woman. At the end of the event, Charlotte paused, looking directly at Matthew, who watched her with a mixture of admiration and apprehension, and that moment seemed to suspend them in time. She then revealed her final gesture, the commitment to make the project a permanent partnership with him, a sign that she was willing to share their lives and dreams. The proposal to combine their strengths in a new venture resonated deeply with Matthew, who not only saw sincerity in the gesture, but also the possibility of a future together. The idea of working side by side, combining their skills and passions, ignited a spark of hope inside him. The look in Charlotte's eyes said it all, and at that moment, he understood that finally, the promise made years ago had transformed into a new chance, an invitation to rebuild a love that had never really disappeared. What once seemed like a distant dream was now becoming a tangible reality, and his heart opened to the possibility of a renewed love, where together they could overcome any obstacle that came their way. Charlotte and Matthew's happy ending unfolded on a radiant afternoon, surrounded by the joy of friends and family. After months of working together on the project that united their passions, the bond between them had become stronger than ever. The charity event Charlotte had organized had been just the beginning of a new phase in their lives, where each supported and encouraged the other to grow. The love that blossomed during these months of partnership culminated in a decision they both had hoped for: marriage. With the support of the community and the warmth of the bonds they had built over the years, Matthew and Charlotte decided to celebrate their love in an intimate yet meaningful ceremony. The chosen location was the same park where they had that emotional reunion, a place that now symbolized not only reconciliation, but also the hope for a future together. The flowers were in full bloom, and the gentle breeze carried with it the fragrance of flowers, creating a magical atmosphere that enveloped all those present. Friends and family arrived early, all excited to share that special moment and at the same time support the couple's new journey. Charlotte, in a simple but elegantly adorned dress, radiated happiness. As she looked in the mirror, the young woman realized how far she had come. She had not only become the doctor she had always dreamed of, but she had also found in Matthew a partner who completed her. Matthew's heart raced as he awaited her arrival, and he couldn't contain his emotion when he saw her approaching. The sunlight reflected off her smile, and he knew in that moment that the wait had been worth it. The promise they made to each other years ago was not just a memory. It was a renewed pact that was now coming to life before everyone. During the ceremony, the vows they exchanged were filled with sincerity and love. Matthew, emotional, spoke about how Charlotte had changed his life, bringing light and hope even in the darkest moments. He expressed his admiration for her determination and how he would support her in every step of her journey. Charlotte, in turn, acknowledged how Matthew had always believed in her, even when doubts arose. She promised to love him unconditionally, not only in the good days, but also in the storms. The tears of joy in both of their eyes reflected the depth of their feelings and the overcoming they had experienced together. As they exchanged rings, the sense of unity and commitment spread among the guests, who clapped with emotion. What had once been a story marked by challenges was now transforming into a victorious love story, where the true essence of love proved capable of overcoming any obstacle. At the end of the ceremony, when they turned to face the crowd as husband and wife, the celebratory mood intensified. Happiness was palpable, and the certainty that they were ready to face the future together illuminated their faces. The reception was a true celebration, filled with laughter, dancing, and moments of pure joy. Friends and family celebrated the love that had finally triumphed, and Charlotte and Matthew danced as if the whole world had disappeared around them. As they lost themselves in each other's arms, they knew that the journey ahead would be filled with new challenges, but also with infinite possibilities. Life had so much to offer, and together, they were ready to embrace every moment with love and courage. The wedding was not just the end of a cycle, but the beginning of a new and exciting adventure, where true love would always find a way. Charlotte and Matthew's love was not just a story of overcoming, it was a journey of self-discovery and mutual growth. Throughout their journey, they faced challenges that tested their limits and questioned their choices. However, what began as a promise to wait for each other transformed into an unbreakable bond, where every difficulty only reinforced the certainty that true love can withstand time and distance. Their story is a reminder that, even when circumstances seem adverse, genuine love will always find a way. Through their experiences, Charlotte and Matthew showed that by investing in communication and mutual support, it is possible to overcome barriers and build a life together, full of purpose and happiness. The promises made in moments of vulnerability can turn into something even more beautiful than imagined. Each of them grew individually, but it was in their union that they discovered the strength needed to face life's challenges. The true essence of love lies in the ability to support one another, even when the road gets tough. For those who relate to Charlotte and Matthew's story, it's important to remember that love is a journey, and every step taken together is an opportunity to grow and connect even more deeply. No matter how challenging life may seem, true love is always worth it. If you also believe that love is the force that moves mountains and transforms lives, consider subscribing to our channel. Join us for more stories that inspire and move, celebrating the beauty of human connections. May your own love journey be filled with light, understanding, and happiness.